Well, welcome to 10 Minutes with Trey on Thursdays. Today we're talking about the topic of fear. Pastor Tom Lance addressed this in his sermon last weekend and then put it on you, Trey, that you're going to give us some more ideas on how we can deal with fear. So what are some of those ways?
Well, one of the things to remember is that we kind of started this conversation already. On April 16th, we talked about worry and anxiety. And you think worry and fear, people use them kind of interchangeably when fear is actually just anxiety about a particular topic. So they're really dealing with the same kind of a thing. So when we're thinking about fear, one of the important things to remember is that fear actually has a purpose. There is a good part of fear. Fear is designed to keep us safe. And our natural body reaction to fear is to fight, to run, or to freeze. So those are things that when you're in danger are very helpful. You know, if someone is trying to kill you, fighting is a good thing. If you're faster than them, running is a good thing. Sometimes freezing is an appropriate response. So it's not bad to have fear. It's bad when you have fear about things that aren't really dangerous, or when your fear is overwhelming and it's all-consuming and it just kind of makes you look at things in a way that's not helpful. So when we're dealing with that, it's important to remember that with fear you get this burst of adrenaline with your fight or your run. So if you're sitting around worrying about things and being afraid, then you're getting all this adrenaline that you have nothing to do with. So then all of a sudden your body is going bonkers because it wants to go run a mile and you're sitting watching TV or watching the news. So there's a big issue with that. And it's also important to remember that you need to fact check your fear. You need to see if it really is something to be afraid of. It's important to remember that feelings are not facts. So just because you feel it doesn't mean it's so. A lot of times our feelings lie to us. So you have to really kind of put them in check. With fear, it's the same way. You have to test it. Ask yourself questions. Is this really something that could harm me right now? Is it really something that I need to do something about right now? Or is it more of a thing that I need to step back, make some big picture plans, but don't really need to be afraid in the moment?
And when that happens, when you start to feel that burst of adrenaline, are there some ways that people can use to help them calm down?
Definitely. One of the things is to start with, you need to think about your body. You need to think about calming your body down. The easiest, best way to start with that is just your breathing. Just think about your breathing, slow your breathing down, make sure you're taking deep breaths. A lot of times when you get really anxious or fearful, all of a sudden you take shallow breaths or you'll find yourself holding your breath. Making sure that you breathe well is a good thing. Exercise is big. Stretching is really good. In dealing with stress and all of what your body's doing with fear, stretching is actually as good as exercise. It stretches out, it helps clean out your muscular system of all of those, all that adrenaline that you're building up.
That's for years.
Yeah. Okay. Not true.
So not only do you get to work on helping calm your body down, but also you need to work on your thinking. A lot of dealing with fear is fixing thinking errors, thinking ways that aren't helpful. The biggest one is all or nothing thinking. It's really easy to put categories into black and white when there's really a lot of gray in the middle. And it's all or nothing. Well, very little in life falls into those categories. So by thinking that way, you make yourself more worried, more nervous, more fearful. And because then it's either 0 or 100, so if there's any danger, there's 100% danger, which is not true, especially not when we're dealing with the coronavirus. It's not everybody's going to get it all the time right now. So then our fear doesn't need to match that kind of thinking.
Yeah, I think just learning to control our minds, that's a hard thing to do. I mean, even with our kids right now, all three of them are ending up in our room in the middle of the night on the floor because we don't let them come in our bed because they're scared. They think someone's going to come into our house. They're learning to deal with their thoughts if they make up in the middle of the night. I'm like, hey, look, we got an alarm. Hey, you got your dad here, all right? Yeah. You don't need to be scared.
Yeah, he stretches. Watch out. Watch out, everybody.
But even has anyone ever come in our house? No. We're going to be okay. You would know. Stay in your bed.
Yes.
But even teaching them to think, and that God is always with you. Put in that in there too. So just learning to help their mind not go to a place which probably will never become a reality. And I think in this day and age, even with the coronavirus and different thoughts and projections, it's not that those things won't come true, but how long will you allow your mind to go there? How far will you allow it to go, and what could possibly happen to the economy, to your job, to your health? There's just a lot of things that I see like people get afraid about where it may not even happen.
Definitely. And
Not that we can't be concerned.
yeah, and you have to find that balance. But the psychological term for that is catastrophizing. When you take something and you make it a catastrophe no matter where it really is. You make it bigger than it really is. And you have to learn how to manage that. It's great that you're teaching your kids to do that early.
Thank you.
The more they can reality test that, the better. So that's really a good principle.
Well, and I realized too, paying attention to like what I'm watching on TV. Like, so in college, I was a big Grey's Anatomy fan. Like, I just watched it all the time, and I was able to handle that. But now, like even, I don't know, a month ago, I turned it on, and I was like, my heart was racing. Like that adrenaline you're talking about, and I was like, I feel like a little anxious right now. Like I couldn't handle it. So just knowing even what's like you said, paying attention to your thinking, paying attention to how your body's reacting before it spirals. Definitely. So I think that's something that I've learned during this time. I'm like, oh, this is a little too close to home.
And once I reminded her that it was a TV show, not real, it made you feel better too.
You're so annoying. Seriously. Oh, wow. Trey, I think Daniel needs to meet with you later.
Yeah. Well, one important thing that you can ask yourself.
Sorry.
It is good to have people in your life that will remind you of those kinds of things, but at the same time, certain people in your life you want to avoid because they really make you a lot more anxious and nervous, right? So, one of the other things to think about as you're working on things is reframing. Reframing is just taking a look at it from a different perspective. When you're really stuck and afraid on something, think about all the different ways that someone could look at that situation, and then all of a sudden, it's not as one-sided and it's not as fearful. It's like, oh, there's some other options. And the more you can remember that there are other options, the easier it'll be to kind of settle that fear down and change that.
I honestly feel like I do that. I do.
Yeah.
Not even trying to be funny right now.
Good.
But when I feel something that makes me afraid, I do think that there's a complete other argument to that. Yeah. And to think, okay, I don't know, that's just what I do.
Do you want to be a counselor
Not trying
now?
to give myself credit.
It's a very healthy way to go, definitely. Another point is that thinking about the here and now, focusing on the here and now is really important. In Matthew 6, it talks about, therefore do not worry about tomorrow, for tomorrow will worry about itself. Each day has enough trouble of its own. And when you're thinking about that, I really like the Message translation of it. It's a little different. It says, give your entire attention to what God is doing right now. And when you can think about that, when you're really looking at your life that way, and you're thinking about, so am I worrying about tomorrow or when school's going to start in the summer or in the fall? When you start focusing on those, it creates this fear because there's this unknown. It's a lot harder to check those facts. It's easier to check facts about today. I know today that my kids are at home learning something. And that's the way it's going to be today and tomorrow. And if I go too much past that, then I get worried.
Yep. And how does all of that have to do with being still?
One of the important connections with being still is that it's difficult for us to be still. Part of why it's difficult is that fear. We'll have that things running through our brain, so then it's hard to settle it down. So then when we slow down and we're still, we start thinking more about our fears instead of controlling what we're thinking. So that's a big part of it. Another is that we've really designed our world to not be slow. We've set a very fast pace to all of what we do. And with that fast pace, we're not used to slowing down. Slowing down doesn't feel right to us. Another part of slowing down is that when we slow down, we deal with things inside of ourselves that we don't like. So we'd rather just go fast and not have to deal with those. It doesn't always feel good working on ourselves and making ourselves better. But what happens is when you are able to be still, slow things down, then you can really manage priorities. Then your priorities are a decision. You're not putting out fires, you're deciding what's important. So when you can decide what's important, then all of a sudden your priorities can be settled in and you can work on making them match God's priorities. And the more that your priorities match God's priorities, then it's a huge way to calm yourself down. So it's like the process that it makes difficult actually helps you stay calm and not be afraid.
Well, Trey, thank you for your time today, and encourage you in your fear, always bring them to the Lord. Cast all your cares, your worries, your fears upon Him. He loves you. He's with you. Our kids are walking through the door right now, so it's time to go. Have a great day. God bless you.